The search for a new Honolulu Police Chief has dragged on for nearly a year. A mainland consultant has narrowed the field, but before a new chief is named by the Honolulu Police Commission, the finalists will have to answer questions from the public. PBS Hawaiʻi is hosting the only live televised conversation with the Honolulu Police Chief finalists. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaiʻi start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi. I'm Yenji Denise. In recent years, the Honolulu Police Department has been plagued with scandal following the conviction of former Chief Louis Kealoha for conspiracy and obstruction. The fallout from the corruption case is still ongoing, and the police department itself has been struggling to repair its reputation. Meanwhile, in April of 2021, then Honolulu Police Chief Susan Ballard announced that she would be stepping down. She said she no longer had the trust or support of the Honolulu Police Commission after receiving low marks for leadership and management in her annual review. For nearly a year now, the search has been on for a new HPD chief. After a long process, 4 men have advanced to the final round after multiple oral and written exercises. And tonight, you'll hear from each of them before a selection is made by the Honolulu Police Commission. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaiʻi.org and on the PBS Hawaiʻi Facebook page. Now to our guests. The order of the introduction was determined by random drawing. After 26 years of service with the New Jersey State Police, Scott Ebner retired in March as a lieutenant colonel. He served in numerous executive leadership positions, including Chief of Staff and Deputy Superintendent of Investigations. Mr. Ebner was also an officer with the Cape Coral Police Department in Florida. He holds degrees in Human Resources Management, Training, and Criminal Justice. Mr. Ebner lives in New Jersey with his wife, son, and daughter. Retired Major General Arthur Joe Logan is a criminal investigator with the State Attorney General's Office. He served as the Adjutant General and Director of the State Department of Defense. In addition to his military career, Mr. Logan served 20 years in the Honolulu Police Department. He and his family moved to Hawaii in 1972, when he attended St. Louis High School. He has degrees in Justice Administration and Management and Strategic Studies. Major Ben Moskowitz has been with the Honolulu Police Department for more than 2 decades. He's currently assigned to the Traffic Division and has also led the Criminal Investigation, Human Resources, and Information Technology Division. He has the unique distinction of having worked in every bureau in the department. Major Moskowitz moved to Hawaii when he was in college and holds degrees in public administration and law enforcement and public safety leadership. And Major Mike Lambert has 19 years of service with the Honolulu Police Department. He's had various assignments, including Narcotics Vice Division, Community Outreach Unit, and is currently the Training Division Commander. Major Lambert has provided investigative and training assistance to other federal, state, and city agencies. He's a Kamehameha Schools graduate and holds a degree in public administration with a justice concentration. You guys are all very well accomplished, and we appreciate all of you for being here tonight. What's so unique about this opportunity, of course, is that the public has not had an opportunity to see or hear from you up until this point. So I'd like to start with you. What would you like to tell the public about yourself and why you'd like to hold this position?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, and it's humbling to be here with these other 3 candidates. But Hawaii has had a dear place in my heart since my honeymoon in 1998 when I came here with my wife. I have friends that live here that have been here a while, and I've traveled out here. I've been here for the past month for this process. This process was long, as you know, like you mentioned, it's been a year. But I think my career experiences play really well into this department. I've been a part of an agency that's over 4,000 members, 3,000 sworn and 1,200 civilian. And I've had the highest levels of command in those areas, including Chief of Staff for 2 years, Deputy Superintendent, and I was actually the Director of the Fusion Center in New Jersey for a year. All these, I think, play well to the outline of how the Honolulu Police Department needs to move forward. It's a large agency. It's a very big city. As you know, New Jersey is one of the most populated states in the country. There's over 9 million people in that small state. And I think my experiences, I know, will help me become a really good chief here. And the support of the members, I think, is something you have to balance. The morale of the members as well as the public. This is something that a police chief, an agency head, has to do on a daily basis. It's extremely important. And I know in my experiences I could do that.
Mr. Lambert, what would you say to the public about why you're best suited for this job?
I think that I have the best blend of new and old. I'm a second generation officer. I get a lot of guidance from my dad from the 80s and the 90s. And I think that I connect best between the younger generation millennials, as far as I'm not too far gone from their generation to where I can understand technology, I can understand electronics, I can understand the fact that they have a different outlook on life in general. And I feel like I would be a great representative to the younger generation, saying that you don't have to be 50, 60 years old before you can hold high-level positions. And I think that it's very inspiring to individuals here in Honolulu, especially when you're losing opportunities to people that maybe have different interests in coming to Honolulu. And I mean that very respectfully. But it's one of those things where, for me, I don't know anything else. I don't know anywhere else. I've never lived anywhere else. I don't intend to live anywhere else. And for me to be chief of police would be such an honor, to bring safety to the community and to the next generation. I want to raise my grandkids here, and I want them to raise their kids here. And there's only one way I can do that, is to ensure that they have a safe environment. The cost of living here is so ridiculous that the only reason why people stay is because it's safe. And as a chief of police, I will have absolute control over that.
Mr. Logan, what would you like to say to the public tonight about why you're pursuing this job?
Well, I left the police department almost 20-something years ago, and I'd like to come back into the police department and finish my career the way I started. I come to an organization where my grandfather was a police officer in New York. I have two uncles that were police officers on the mainland. I have two brothers that were also members of the Honolulu Police Department. Police Department, it's the fabric of what the Logan family stands for. And so for me to be an opportunity to come back as a police chief, I walk into the job with 5 years of already senior management level experience running the State Department of Defense. So I have that training, I have that experience, I have the knowledge base that's required to do that. And so I think I'm more than prepared to take over the organization right from the get-go. I've identified some issues and things that need to be fixed right away. As you mentioned earlier in your opening statement, there is some chaos that happened between previous chiefs that have created some things in the department that the department needs to heal from. And so that's the immediate nature of my business, is to fix that healing and get the department's trust back with the community as soon as possible. And to do that, I think the leadership and the chief need to be out in the community every day, meeting with the community, meeting with business leaders, and re-engaging so that reputation and that trust is rebuilt again.
Mr. Moskowitz, what would you like to say to the public tonight?
I want to say thank you. Start off, thank you to you, and thanks to PBS for hosting this. As I'm sure will come out a little bit later, I've been commuting back and forth from Arlington, Virginia, the last couple of weeks for the process, and I've had the really unique opportunity to be at the FBI National Academy right now. And that's given me a tremendous insight, mind the pun, into viewpoints from law enforcement from around the world. And when I talk to them about the selection process and what we're going through, to a person, no one has ever told me or brought up that they've seen a public call-in TV talk show where the public can actually weigh in and see what people are like and meet candidates. And so, I could go over a lot of my professional experience. I'm sure we'll touch that later, but I really feel for me, the reason is I went through a master's degree program very recently at the University of San Diego, and a lot of different pieces of my career and my kind of morals and virtues, and the program kind of coalesced everything to me into this vision that I have the opportunity and the timing is right, and I have the leadership skills, and I think I have a lot of great ideas that'll help the department move forward into the coming years.
Well, you mentioned that the public has been participating in this forum, and you guys have already, and please keep those questions coming through whatever medium you prefer. We've gotten dozens of questions, and I want to get right to them. There was an article in the Star Advertiser earlier this week that outlined that crime in Hawaii, in Honolulu specifically, is at a 3-year high. It's on the minds of our viewers tonight. And Mr. Ebner, let's start with you. Clayton writes, how would you reduce crime on Oahu when your police department is dealing with a personnel shortage? And Karen from Waipahu says, what is the short and long-term plan for crime on Oahu, especially drug dealers?
Sure. Well, thank you for that question, Yunji. I think it's important to understand that's a twofold question. I think immediately you'd have to reassess and reevaluate where your personnel are going to be assigned to address the needs. Obviously, patrol and operations is the backbone of any agency. I know that from 30 years of experience. That's what I would do immediately. I would assess the department, but at the same time, I would bolster, or I would do a campaign blitz to actually recruit and hire and retain officers, both new from within the island, off the island, but also lateral officers. I think you have to do both. It's impossible to make up for 300 plus officers that you're down and not be able to prioritize where you need to assign personnel. And I think that's how I would start. And based on my experience, I would really hold supervisors and command accountable. They need to be held accountable and know that in their area of responsibility, they're responsible for it. And we need to make sure that us as commanders, whoever this will be as chief, will be supporting them and getting them everything they need to accomplish that. So that's what I would do. I would prioritize, and I would move people probably from different specialty areas to patrol and operations immediately. I mean, we can't have officers working nonstop overtime to just supplement the road. It's not fair. Their health and wellness is extremely important.
Okay. Mr. Lambert, how would you address these crime questions?
So as far as our rising crime goes, sometimes we throw out data points and we're very insensitive to the fact the department tries to defend it and say it's not that bad. Ask somebody who's making up those numbers, right? If you're one of those people that lost someone to homicide, if you've been raped, if you've been robbed, hearing that it's not that bad is not what they want to hear, right? No matter what, I don't care what the numbers are, we can always improve. For me, violent crime would always be at the top. Everyone that's watching that knows me knows that I'm big on diversion at the very bottom for the low-level crimes. But to be very clear, at the very top, people need to be held accountable. People need to go to jail. And in regards to the recruitment effort, I think that you got to have short-term and long-term plans. The biggest thing that is hindering people from joining HPD is that we lack legitimacy. Who wants to work for an agency that is perceived to be corrupt? Who wants to work for an agency that has rampant nepotism, right? Who wants to work for an agency that you won't get in trouble as long as you're friends with somebody? Nobody does. So for me as a chief of police, I need to restore legitimacy to the agency. I need to make it where people are proud to work here and not just waiting for their 25 and out. And when I do that, then people will apply for this job. And again, you got to have short-term, long-term. You have to have the ability and the courage, like Lieutenant Colonel Ebner said, is to take away from the divisions that aren't quite necessary right now and put them into patrol. Now, there's going to be people that are going to be upset with me on that. And it's one of those things where I'm going to have friends that have worked very hard to get into these nice-to-have positions, and I'm going to take that away from them. But at the end of the day, my job is to restore public safety, restore public trust, and it's not my personal club, meaning that if I leave here with nothing more than my integrity and no friends because I had to make tough decisions, then so be it. I'll go back to my family, I'll hug my kids, and hopefully I'll be remembered as one of the best chiefs Honolulu ever had.
Mr. Logan, how would you address the rising crime?
Well, I'd like to thank Creighton and Karen for that question. The rise in crime, it's a growing issue. It's something the department needs to pay attention to. Going off with what Scott and Mike said, we need to reprioritize where the manpower is going to go. We're short 350 people. Let's relook at where the patrol is the source of the energy for the police department. That's what we in the military call center of gravity. So we want to say that's where patrol, that's where the manpower should be. Focus on there. Focus on investigations because they're the ones backing up patrol. And so we do that. That's where we put the manpower at first while we're recruiting and getting out there and finding officers, whether we can lateral people from the mainland. There's local people that work in police departments across the United States and want to come back to Hawaii. What better way than to have them come back in the police department? So it's a way to fill those vacancies. But to get after the high crime rate, it's to identify and create in the patrol and in the investigative units, create task forces to get the technology together with computer sciences to model out where crime is, identify where those crime trends are, and then be able to send people with those task forces to those high crime areas so that we can have a way to reduce the crime. We need to do it proactively, not reactively. Patrol does things if they're out on the streets patrolling with their lights on, people can see that may deter crime, may not stop all crime, but it will if it deters one crime, that's well worth the time and effort that's spending out there. And so then you have, with the task forces, you have maybe plainclothes officers out and about in the area that are monitoring those trouble spots or hot spots, as they call it, and then they can take care of the situations that arise from there.
Mr. Moskowitz, what do you think? How do we best reduce crime in our city?
So one of the big, two things. First of all, I mean, anybody who watched the news this morning, right, woke up to another shooting at another well-known game room crime is running rampant surrounding the game rooms and drug institutions in our community. And that's totally unacceptable. We need to refocus our efforts, much as these other guys have said, we need to refocus our efforts on stopping those. That's very low-hanging fruit for us. You want to talk about one of the dirty secrets of HPD? We have over 100 officers who are assigned to various places throughout the entire department who are on these long-term special assignments. And special assignment at HPD means maybe you're assigned to patrol here in Kalihi area, but your specific skills are needed somewhere else in the department. So your body is not working in patrol in Kalihi, but your position is still assigned to Kalihi. So that doesn't create a vacancy. It doesn't give us an opportunity to fill those spots. So when we talk about vacancies, the problem is actually much worse than the public's been led on to because of this gigantic entangled mess of special assignments. So within the first 30 days of my administration, we're going to reevaluate every single one of those and get people back on the streets. That can happen instantaneously within days. We also have an alternative call service, an ACS section, where we have several full duty status officers who are sitting in a room taking calls. I'd much rather have them driving around a neighborhood. And if you want to call and have them take a report, then they can come to your house. And much to Joe's point, I'd rather have a police car sitting in front of your house while an officer takes a report than have you submit something online or in the phone. And don't get me wrong, there's an area for organizational efficiency and submitting things efficiently and getting things processed efficiently, but I'd much rather get a bunch more officers on the road. And when it comes to recruiting and retention, I view that as kind of two different issues. And to take issue with something that Mike said earlier, and that might become a theme, I don't know, Mike and I get along real well, but we have some different viewpoints. I think people are proud to work at HPD. I know that I'm proud to be an HPD officer. I think that we need to figure out what drives and motivates people and where their pride in HPD lies and capitalize on that. I think that's a huge opportunity to find out why people work for HPD and to develop that into a campaign. Also, from recruiting and retention point of view, I think that attrition should not be the mission at the academy, right? We bring in a large group of people who may have differing abilities. Again, going back to my FBI experience, they bring in a class of 180, 190 new recruits, and they graduate 95, 98% of those recruits. So I think whether we're picking the wrong people or we're training them wrong, that part I don't know, but attrition has to not be the mission. We have to be able to take and develop people who are qualified, who meet backgrounds, and get them integrated into our organization. And one way to do that is to take young people who maybe don't qualify to be police officers, maybe 18, 19, 20 years old, fresh out of high school. Rather than have Joe recruit them and have them head off to the Guard or the Army or Navy active duty, I'd much rather bring them into the police department as recruits. We'll keep them out of trouble, we'll attribute them and acclimate them to HPD's culture, teach them some real life job skills, and when they turn 21, the background is done. And if they want to join the police department as a sworn officer, it's a much easier process to start filling spots. But again, that's the number of vacancies is definitely a lagging indicator from all these issues that we're talking about.
Well, all four of you mentioned recruitment, and so I want to dive a little deeper into that issue. And we'll start with you because you did mention a variety of ways that perhaps we could boost the number of recruits. But why do you think that these numbers have gotten to where they are? Why have we gotten to over 300 officers not joining the force? Why are we so short? And what could you do right away to change that?
It's not an easy problem, and it's not a problem that's going to resolve itself overnight. Across the nation, agencies are down 20, 30, 40%. Maui's short 100 sworn officers, right? And they only have 300 or 400 officers to begin with, so their problem is much worse than ours. So I think part of it is connecting with applicants and connecting with recruits. And yes, it's important for different generations of people to emphasize different things, to emphasize the huge benefits, the amazing retirement that we receive as part of our profession might have influenced me or the other candidates in this room, but that might not be an influence for people who are looking to apply today. So I think it's really important that we understand why people enjoy being a police officer and we translate that into something that people will get now.
Mr. Ebner, how do you think we fill those 300 plus seats?
Well, first of all, I think that didn't happen overnight. That was a failure by leadership for years to come that brought us to this point. If I'm chief, we're going to rectify that. It's going to take a couple years, but I will leave it better than I found it. In 5, 7, 10 years from now, this will not be a problem. the problem is that right now you have also these social issues, but you have people that feel like, is this really the profession I want to go in? If you look at the numbers at any agency across the country, like Ben was saying, they're down for people applying into this line of work. We need to let them know that this is one of the most noble professions in the world. You'll put your life on the line for a stranger. Anyone would do right now if something happened right here. That's just how we are. And that's what police officers are. It's an extremely noble profession. Not everyone's cut out to do it, but the people who are, we need to let them know, and especially the officers that are here now, you matter, you count, you're very important to us. I know there's going to be negative press now and then, but you're also going to have somebody like myself that will have your back, will tell the public what they need to hear, the truth, but also we can recruit based on that. We need to use all the officers that are here, like Ben was saying, that are proud of being here. There's always people that aren't proud of what they do, and they're the negative, few percent that really will talk the loudest. But we could use social media, advertising campaigns, and we can make sure that we get this message out. This is a great place to come and work. That's why I want to be here. And I would make sure that other people would want to come here. You could attract people from community colleges. The military is a great place to attract, and on Oahu, what a better place to look for people from the military. I do think there's an untapped resource that we could hit, and I would love to be part of that.
I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
So exactly what Ben and Scott are saying. We used to have the cadet program. So you'd catch the 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds coming out of high school. You'd give them the police test. They pass the test. They pass pretty high. So you bring them in the department now as a young cadet, and they wear a different color uniform, and they're running around helping the different division commanders do odd jobs and things. But as soon as they're old enough to get into recruit school, and then you put them in. So that way you don't lose them to the military. Although being a guardsman and being in the military is a wonderful way to survive here in Hawaii at the cost of living, as Mike brought up earlier. And so there's a way that we, in Hawaii, we need to recruit from within. The recruiting pool here is difficult because it's small. The 18 to 24-year-olds that you want in the police department, you're competing against military, you're competing against college, you're competing against other venues and sports people that want to bring the kids out and to the mainland. And so we're all vying for the same people. And so that pool gets narrow and smaller. And then the rigors of joining the police department and passing the physical agility test, the psychological test, and taking the test. So those are difficult, and then passing the polygraph. And so maybe we need to look at that and say, what questions are we asking in the polygraph? Not to reduce the standards, but to maybe take a look at the standards across the board to see how we can stretch things to allow that we can get more people into the department. And then once they get in, then we assess whether they belong here or not. As Scott says, not everybody can be a police officer. It's not a career field that everybody wants to be in. But those that come in want to know that they're going to be here for 25, 30 years. This is a career. It's a profession. It's the same thing as being a doctor, a lawyer, a plumber, for that matter. You're going to do this for the long haul, and you got to take pride in that. And you got to understand that it's a lifelong learning opportunity when you get in. And so you got to sell that to the younger generation that you're looking at to bring them in. Men and women, you need to get them into the department and show them what it means to be a police officer and show it as a profession. And I think we'll get more people in.
Given the challenges that you outlined, some of the public perception of what being in the department is, how would you change that so that you could bring in more recruits? And what specifically would you do to make sure that we have enough officers?
So like I said, everything that they said is true, but what everybody's forgetting to address is a lack of legitimacy. And like I said, you can have every program in the world, but if your agency is not somewhere where people want to work, because of the public perception. And I just want to be very clear. I never said the officers were not proud. We are proud. It's the reason why that we can create the type of safety we have with these short numbers. What I was saying is that nobody new is going to want to come in due to the perceptions that we carry. I echo the cadet program. And in fact, I'll take it one step further. I actually have a model that I've created, which is called JCOP. It's called Junior Cadet Officer Program, which takes a step prior to cadet, where we would kind of model after the JROTC in high school. But what it would be, it'd be specific for law enforcement. So I think there's a unique opportunity right now. I think earlier today, there was a DOE thing going on. So there'll be some new leadership there. If there's some new leadership here, and there's an opportunity to do a JCOP program, which would basically be almost what recruits experience now. So in high school, we teach them the laws. We teach them, how to be a good civil servant, how to be a good community member. And what happens is, upon graduation, when they walk, we will offer them a conditional offer to be a cadet. And it's something that we would do to get out in the community. And when they're walking, you know, I'm going to this college, you're going to that college. Well, this individual, Mr. Mike Lambert, is going to be attending the academy as a cadet, right? And we're going to do those type of things. And we're going to plant the seed. And again, everybody wants this quick fix, and it ain't going to happen. You can say what you're going to want to say. You're going to have a short-term strategy, you're going to have a long-term strategy, and it's going to be the combination of the two that make the difference. My short-term strategy is that you got to have a dedicated recruitment team. We have one now, right? They're called the recruitment team, but half of their job is to assess the incoming recruits. So they're not out there 100% of the time recruiting, which means that we're missing out on opportunities. You know, at the college level, we're missing it out at the military, and people decide that, you know, maybe, you know, serving that in that fashion is not what they want to do. They want to grow roots here in Honolulu, and there's offerings that we can make. And again, it's going to be a short-term and long-term solution so that, like Scott mentioned, is that we can leave it better than what we left it. And that gap is going to be hard to fix. And again, until we can get those type of issues ironed out, it's really going to be about being efficient and restoring legitimacy. You're going to hear me say that all night long, Yenji, because I can tell you right now, every issue we are facing in this department is because we lack legitimacy to the community. Now, internally, we have great officers. We have some of the most skilled officers in the country. And that's why I'm running, is because I feel as if we're not doing a good job of saying what we do, who we are, how much we love the community, and how much we care about their future and their safety. And I think that I can bring that back.
Well, on that legitimacy point, there are a number of questions here, Calvin and Gary, basically asking, how do you restore confidence and respect from the general public? How do you plan to stop HPD corruption and cover-ups at HPD? Whether or not there is corruption or cover-ups at HPD, what Calvin's question here indicates that there is a public perception that that is the case. Obviously, we talked about the Kealoha case right off the top. When you have that kind of fall from grace from leadership, you know, you have certainly a lack of legitimacy. So how do you repair that image issue? And also some of the things that Calvin and Gary, just in terms of public confidence and respect.
No, and those are great questions. And there's going to be two things that I'm going to do. I'm going to institute a disciplinary matrix, very much similar to the one used in New York Police Department. They're the largest police department in the world, I think, which means they have the largest and strongest union in the world. And for New York to be able to discipline in a fair and consistent manner, they use a matrix, meaning that this is the allegation, this is what you get. It doesn't matter who you are, who you know, if you're my best friend or not, that's what you're going to get. When the community is upset and they say this officer was doing this, they can open up the matrix and say, if I make my complaint, this is what they're going to expect to get based on what that complaint is. Right now, when we have change in command, we have change in chiefs, what happens is there's an inconsistent way to rule what an allegation should get. And what happens is that that's why we lose arbitration. What people don't know is the reason why we lose arbitration so much is that the union is able to point back into an earlier period in time where the punishment was less for something similar. The disciplinary matrix, once I start it, will be consistent, and we will start to win arbitration. When we win arbitration, we will look legitimate in the eyes of the department, in the eyes of the community, that the department is able to hold officers accountable. In regards to improving in transparency, I want to create a media matrix so that people like yourself and members of the community can anticipate when they're going to get information. Right now, it's arbitrary, right? You might hear about it tomorrow. You might hear about it next week, whenever we feel we're ready to take on those questions. What's going to happen is if I'm chief, right, as I'm doing right now, I have no fear of speaking because I speak from the heart and I speak the truth. And if people can't accept that, then I apologize. But for example, what that disciplinary matrix will look like is if it's an officer-involved shooting, you will hear nothing less from a deputy chief within 8 hours. If it's a traffic tie-up, you'll hear from nothing less than a lieutenant, right? And it'll be that type of thing. I think that one of the biggest things that I'm going to do is restore trust with the media, right? Why would you report positively on the news for us on the news when we make your guys' job difficult, right? We would hold information, right? You guys can't get out a good news story, so you guys looking at. Why would you want to report favorably, right? So what I want to do, like with this whole P25 stuff, right, is give you guys back access. Now I get it, right? Chief Vanek gave a great, presentation on why it's not a good idea. So for me, why don't we just meet in the middle? Why don't I create a media room at the station where the radios are there, it'll be recorded, everybody can see it, right? You sign some waivers, some MOUs, so that you can't, if you touching the radios, you'll be asked to leave. right? And then we can go ahead and repair that relationship. I just don't think we think out of the box enough. It's like we hide behind rules and, oh, HIPAA this and, you know, FFA this and all these other rules instead of just trying to find a solution. So I think that when I restore media trust, when I restore community trust, and when I get information out quickly, all of those things that the callers are asking will be achieved.
Okay. Mr. Ebner, let's get your take on how to restore public confidence in the department given what's happened over the last few years.
Certainly. Well, I think with me, I believe I have an advantage being an outsider. I could come in and I could objectively look at our policies. When I say our, the Honolulu Police Department's policies, how people are in positions. Are they in positions because of what Mike was saying, because they know someone or they're a family friend or they're a relative? No, we have to put people with the best skill set in the best positions to succeed, regardless of who they are. And that starts from the top down and the bottom up. But what I would do is I think it's important for us to know, I mean, when we first came here in March was the first part of our test. And part of that test, I went through a tour of the police department. You were there, and another individual was there. So Joe was there. And I was so surprised. I saw the list of chiefs on the wall and their pictures, and they have your previous police chief, who's in prison now for 7 years, up on there. Immediately the day I take over, he would be taken down. He lost that right to be considered a police chief of the Honolulu Police Department. That's how I feel about transparency. That's how I feel proud about this profession. And I think the officers and the public need to know that. So we will engage the public, if I'm police chief, more from the top down and then the bottom up. Like I said, every officer needs to know that they're a leader in this department. I don't care if you just graduated the academy, you're a leader. And that's why you were hired. And we have faith in you. And it comes from setting an example, leading by example. In my previous position in the state police, I was in internal affairs for 9 years, from a detective all the way up to a commander. During that time frame, part of it, the New Jersey State Police was under a federal consent decree. So I know firsthand of how building policies, development policy, early warning systems for use of force, for just complaints, that's something that needs to happen here. Like Mike was saying, it's very important for the members to know that they're going to be treated the same, regardless of their rank, regardless of who they are, for their conduct. That's the important thing. And the majority of officers, the lucky thing that I realized after 9 years is that it's not misconduct per se. They didn't do it intentionally. It's a training issue. They made a mistake. They need to be retrained, or we need to develop policies that better keep officers knowing what they need to do. They need to know what's going to happen if they do this. And we develop policies. By right now, you have the best process in place. You have body-worn cameras. It's like we can review everything that takes place, and we should be reviewing it, again, to further train ourselves and to better develop policy, but more importantly, to develop the best officers you can, because that's what you have. You have a system in place that allows you to do that.
Mr. Logan, how do we restore public trust in the department?
It's just as Scott and Mike has said, we need to get, the leadership of the police department needs to be out front with the community. And Calvin and Gary, thank you for the question. We need to be the forefront, the face of the department. We need to be in the community. We need to engage. We can talk a lot, but to restore legitimacy with the community is going to take action. It's going to take action from the patrol officer on the street to the investigator to the traffic cop on soil bike and all of those in between. And that's how you're going to build legitimacy and show it. Discipline, we always look at discipline as a negative. Discipline is actually a positive if you use it in the right manner. And you have a young officer that made a mistake, needs to be disciplined, so you discipline them, but you're saving their job. You're not firing them. You're going to retrain them. You're going to send them back to some education where they find out what they did wrong, they learn from their mistakes, and then they're a better officer from that point on. And so the community will see that, because that officer, Hawaii is very unique, where our officers come from the same communities we live in. And so the community is going to see the officer. They're going to see him at the supermarket. They're going to realize, okay, you made a mistake and now you're better for that. So we got to be transparent with, as Mike says, with the discipline in what we do. So we can't hide anything. We have to let the public know what's going on internally and externally. They need to see what's going on. So we're not hiding things. And we're not creating entities where they're doing things in private. Now, of course, we have agencies or organizations and people within them that are intelligence gathering and doing some other things that are behind the scenes. But generally speaking, what the department does in front of the cameras or in front of the public is the way to build legitimacy, and we need to do it properly. We need to train them properly. We need the supervisors to supervise our men and women that are out there, and they need to take the sergeant and lieutenant are the backbone of the patrol, and making sure that our patrol officers are doing the right thing, that they're trained, and that they're coached, taught, and mentored to get promoted there in the future. And so if we do all of those things, and then we need to be the media and the police department should be in friendship together, and then we should ask the media to help us tell our story. As Mike said, we've got to get out there and we've got to let the community know what the police department is about and what it's doing to restore legitimacy, and what it's doing every day on the beat, and how things are going. Are we improving or are we not? If we're not improving, then we got to hold people accountable. Let's find out where we're not doing the right things, where we're not improving, where we're not making a safe and secure Honolulu, and then figure out how to fix that, and use the media and your capabilities to get with to reach out and meet with the public, and how and use the community to provide us solutions on how to best do that.
Mr. Moskowitz, I'm interested to know, do you agree with even the premise of Calvin's question? How do you plan to stop HPD corruption and cover-ups?
I think regardless of whether I personally believe it or not, the more important issue is that members of the public believe it. And that's kind of goes to the root of the question and what we've talked about for the last couple minutes. To me, it boils down to trust. Right? The police department cannot be everywhere at once. It's impossible. We need partnerships, we need collaborations with the public. And the only way we're going to do that is to build trust and enhance trust. To go back to some of what we were talking about a little earlier, the issue about body cams. The Police Commission has repeatedly made recommendations that when they investigate allegations of malfeasance at the Police Commission level, the sheer vast number of officers who just didn't activate their body cams. We've got to start there. And once we have a more robust activation of body cams, the next thing is we take information following a critical incident, and we follow what other large departments have done. The Los Angeles Police Department, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. If there's a critical incident involving their officers, which means any member of the public or an officer is critically injured or killed as a result of force or some sort of police intervention, they come out with a public safety briefing, and it's very public. They put as much information out as they can. They do it within 3 to 4 days. They put it on YouTube so everybody can see it. They share it with the media, and there's a narrated voiceover that shows body cam footage, that shows what transpired, explains it to allow the police department to offer an explanation behind some of the tactics or ideas maybe that members of the public might not see or understand. So that's certainly something that I would start with right away. Very first critical incident, you have to be forthcoming with information, proactive with the information, honest, transparent communication, and more importantly, get as much information as you can out as quickly as possible. Dealing with the integrity issue. Sorry, I know we're on question 4 and we're like half an hour in, but if you're looking, if the police commission or the public is looking for a candidate, and I'm not saying anybody here is this, but this is how I view myself. If you're looking for someone who's going to look the other way when we're talking about allegations of criminal misconduct or serious conduct violations, then I'm not the guy. Pick somebody else. I'm almost physically unable to ignore things like that. And to Mike's point, we absolutely do lose a lot of arbitrations, and we lose them in addition to the reasons Mike said, because we don't have justifiable reasons. Some of the arbitrators who, again, have sort of a veil of secrecy, that if you read some of the arbitration arguments, they'll say that, well, terminating an employee is the death sentence of employment law. And I don't know that I would go quite that far, but it's important to realize that there have been officers who have intentionally done things wrong and who have committed crimes who need to be terminated, right? We as police professionals in this room, I don't think you'll find anyone who's going to tell you that the department is 100% full of people who are doing the right thing all the time. 99% of them doing the right thing all the time, almost guarantee. But there is a very small percentage, and that small percentage needs to be identified and in a very strategic and formulaic way told to find another profession.
I want to get to the issue of supporting officers, and there are a number of questions here concerned about officers' mental health and their well-being. We have one from Cindy. I just want to read the names because we appreciate these people writing in. Lena, Alicia, Christine, and Eva Beach, along with Nikos. And they all basically say, this sums it up pretty well, due to our current climate with rising crime, shortage of officers, and low morale, if you are selected as the new chief for HPD, what would you do to support our officers during this challenging time? This one also says mental health services for HPD personnel are not adequate, and many who seek out help are concerned about stigma and the organization's culture. So how do we best support officers who are doing tremendous work with a lot of stress?
Well, we need to identify those officers, and thank you, all of you, for that question. It's a wonderful opportunity to identify that wellness and police, one of the 21st century pillars from the Presidential Task Force. And it identifies basically that officer wellness and officers' physical agility is very important. Officers need to make sure that they stay in shape, that they're mentally, physically, and spiritually healthy. And that's how they come to work every day. And we, as the leadership of the department, as a chief, I'm going to make it a point to visit those that maybe need help. Maybe they don't want people to know they need help, but it's important to get the message out to everyone that you need to seek help if you have issues coming to work. I know being in the military, there's a lot of guard guys and active duty military that come back and they have PTSD, but because of machoism and other issues, they don't want to say that they have issues. They want to say that they're normal and they can behave and act in the way, but you soon find out that they can't. And so officers are no different. They see trauma, they see events, they see things that happen all the time. And I think there's a far more vast array of police officers today that have PTSD that really don't know they do. And so we as an organization need to come up and find ways to help them. And we need to have either a psychologist or a psychiatrist on board within the police department so we can render assistance to those officers that come and seek help. I know we have a peer support group that does some of that, that's able to get out there and identify police officers that need help, and we need to get them in. But it takes a police officer 2 to 1 say, I need help. I need someone, whether they're a family member or them, come forward. And so they need to seek that help, and then that would make them a better officer on the streets.
Mr. Moskowitz, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that the current support for officers within the department is adequate, and what would you do if not to change that?
Woefully inadequate. I mean, police officers in one day can experience a lifetime worth of trauma. This is the only profession, you're in a room full of people that will run towards gunfire. And the things that we see and the things that we experience over the course of a day or a week or a shift, let alone a career, are just, they're astonishing. And part of that is training, part of it is learning to deal with it in the short term until you can resolve it. But to Joe's point, we absolutely should have a psychologist. We actually have 3 funded positions in the department. We can't fill them. We can't find people who are qualified who want to work in the department. We've been trying. When I was in HR, we tried. We got really close to almost hiring one. To me, it's a matter of prioritization. The department can move mountains if that's what they're trying to do. Under my administration, you're going to see the creation of a wellness unit. And the wellness unit is going to report directly to the chief's office, at least initially, until we can get things set up and organized. Full-time, we do have a peer-to-peer network as well, but we have one full-time officer whose job is to administer this program. That's not enough. There's 2,500 some odd sworn civilian, part-time employees, volunteers, contract workers. One person is not enough. We need to be able to use technology. There are several applications that are available that can be provided as resources free of charge to department employees. And that's something I was actually working on when I was in information technology before it got sidetracked by a previous administration. But like I said, for me, the main issue is an issue of prioritization. And this would be one of the main issues of my administration, and the creation of a wellness unit immediately to get these things running is absolutely important.
Mr. Lambert, how do you think it is right now, and what would you change?
Yeah, I mean, we treat our officers like they're expendable, right? They work brutal shifts. We don't always have their back in regards to, when things go wrong, we condemn them very quickly. And it's a very, how can I say, sometimes you just feel like the command is ungrateful, right? For all the sacrifices they're making, right? Missing holidays, missing birthdays, missing weddings to serve the community. And then when they make a mistake, they just get, railed, right? So it's one of those things where I am a huge advocate for officer wellness. I'm the only CIT coordinator in Honolulu right now, and crisis intervention team. One of the aspects is that officer wellness is very important. I recently spoke to the mental health, one of the state mental health task force, and asked for their support in having officers have 1 hour paid time to exercise throughout their 40-hour work week. I know that we have adjusted schedules, but I'm just going to say 40 hours in general, right? A 40-hour work week, that the first hour when they come to work, that they can go exercise. There's not a single study in the world that says that exercise is bad for you, right? So what we got to do is, and then I was able to gain their support, right? They said, no, we absolutely rather have 39 hours of an officer that is happy, that feels appreciated, versus 40 hours of officers that just feel like their job sucks and nobody cares, right? So what it would look like is you come in on your Monday, you know, however your week went, you come home in your gym clothes, you check in because we need you to be able to work on time, right? Then you go work out, right? What is the message that's being sent to officers? That we care about you. Before you serve the community, you go in that weight room, you serve yourself, right? And they're gonna come in, they're gonna come refreshed. If nothing else, right? They can kind of like woos off for an hour, right? There's things that I'm thinking about, silent rooms that can have some nice music playing, nice ambiance, no electronics, where they can kind of just recenter themselves and come out. One of the things that I'm gonna do is create a wellness committee, right, where the officers choose, right? You guys wanna have one of those fancy red rooms? You guys wanna have a silent room? Whatever. Whatever it is you guys think as a group will help you guys center yourself on your Monday for your first hour. So like I said, everybody's gonna throw out what they would do. I've already done this. I've already been advocating for officer wellness, right? That's that. In regards to the mental health services for officers, we need to figure out a way for officers to say, I feel really bad about myself and I feel like I may hurt myself or someone else because of the things that I've been through. Right now, there is no way you can do that without giving up your gun, right? So meaning that if I raise my hand and I say I feel ill, I will take away your livelihood, right? We need to figure out a way to be supportive of our officers. Say, if you feel that way, you are not going to lose your job. Everything has limits, but we got to allow people time to rehabilitate, right? In other words, fine, you feel that way, right? Let's go ahead and put you through a program. Let's go ahead and get you some support. We'll, depending on how bad your condition is, we'll put some timelines, right? You know, let's go 6 months, 12 months, and let's not just throw people away. You know, I hope that my friend's wife doesn't get upset at me, but I just lost a friend not more than 12 months ago. He took his own life, right? And I'm not gonna get choked up about it, but it's because this job was just too hard. And he had gotten into trouble, and he wasn't sure whether or not he'd have his job. And no matter what I told him, right, because of the inconsistency in discipline, and that some people get busted, some people don't, he thought he was gonna lose his job, right? And it led to him making a very poor choice. So I am very passionate about officer safety in regards to their own personal wellness. I am very serious about discipline being consistent so that our officers are not so stressed out that they make poor decisions.
Okay, how do we best address officer mental health so that we prevent incidents like what he's talking about? Because that is heartbreaking to hear.
It absolutely is, and it's a systemic problem in the United States if you look at the recent statistics of suicides among law enforcement officers. Health and wellness for officers is near and dear to my heart. We want officers to be resilient. What that means is they went through something traumatic and they pushed their way forward. And all officers at one point in their career are going to face something traumatic. Some more than others, some it's affected more than others. I have experience from my previous department of a very large agency that we had our own medical unit with doctors and medical staff. But I think what's important is that we could develop programs here with the input from the officers, with the input from the union, with the ultimate goal is the health and wellness of the officers, to try and prevent them from going down a path that's unhealthy. So having a comprehensive medical for every officer every year that they have to go to, which will team with medical professional facilities and also a psychological. You just don't want to go to a psychological because you're involved in a traumatic incident. That's a stigma that you don't want. If everyone goes once a year just for a conversation to see how they're doing, this is a difficult profession. The average person has problems with depression, with dependencies. Officers, it's compounded. They're working shifts away from their family, away from their children. It's very complicated, but it's not so complicated because we work with people all the time. If somebody's acting a little different, I'm working with Mike, Joe, and Ben here, you know when they're not acting normal. You know when they're off. We need to make sure that we have a program in place that other officers can report that, and it's not going to be a misconduct because they smelled alcohol in somebody or because they know they're going through marital problems or spouse problems at home or with their children. There's so many issues that affect law enforcement officers that obviously affect the public. If that officer is not 100% and they're going out interacting with the public, that's not professional. That's a problem that we need to overcome, and it can be overcome, but it's something we need to commit to. It comes with robust policy, with support from the union, with support from other officers and commanders. It's not that, aha, so-and-so did something wrong. No, so-and-so needs help. Let's get them the help they need and get them back to work at 100%.
These questions are piling in, so I want to get to as many as possible. And there's a theme here. Mr. Lambert, we'll start with you on this. Basically on priorities. You know, we've talked a lot about how the department doesn't have enough officers and is strapped for resources. So Lisa wants to know, what will each finalist do in the first 90 days in office? Please prioritize those tasks. Rodney, what will be your #1 priority to improve HPD? And this question is related to say, what do you see as HPD's greatest weakness, and what actions would you take to fix them? So first 90 days, given the limited resources and the challenges that we've laid out, what is task #1?
Task #1 is you have to do a complete efficiency review. You don't want to come in with pre-designated ideas on what's wrong. You need to go to each unit, you need to see what they do, you need to see how much work that they can complete and what is the return on investment. So there's going to be a very involved efficiency review, meaning that I will personally be going down to talk to every division, every unit to see what they do. And again, like we talked about earlier, is if they can't justify their existence in regards to hours per week, I will reduce that unit size and put their bodies in patrol. Now, if they can say that they're like, you know, I'm breaking their back, then I'm going to give them bodies. And it's that type of efficiency review that we need to look at. Like again, we have a lot of nice to have positions, and exactly what it sounds like. It's a nice to have. We're not in that type of position right now. So one of the first things I do is a complete efficiency review. Again, that disciplinary matrix will be completed within the first 90 days. I'm going to work with the union to make sure that they understand where I stand on certain issues. I am open to discussion in regards to some of the lower offenses, meaning that things that would result in 1 to 5 days, but I'm going to be very staunch on things that would result in dismissal, meaning that they don't belong among us. I'm going to kind of have a two-head type of thing when it comes to dismissal, right? Is the action forgivable? Is the action correctable, right? So what's an example of that? You abuse your wife, that's not forgivable, right? You need to go, right? Now, what's an action that is forgivable, but not trainable? The second one is not trainable, would be where you keep making the same mistake over and over, right? If you're going to keep making the same mistake over and over, you're not responding to training, you're not understanding your role in the community, then unfortunately, maybe this isn't the career for you, because we're a job that's all about rules, it's all about regulations, it's all about maintaining consistency. So it's going to be a two-head, right? Is it forgivable? Is it retrainable? And that's just in very general terms. So again, it's going to be reallocating resources. I don't want to burn up too much time, but I do have a comprehensive plan. I do have a 5-year plan. If I am chosen, I will give it on Tuesday, right? If I'm picked on Monday, I will give it on Tuesday. I am prepared to tell everyone what my comprehensive plan is, the timelines I expect to complete them in, and you guys can all hold me accountable for those.
Okay. First 90 days, what is task #1?
#1 is patrol staffing. Absolutely, we can't continue to operate patrol elements at 60, 70, 80% staffing on the basis of overtime. It's not fiscally responsible. It's not responsible from any leadership standpoint. We need to undo this tangled mess of special assignments like I talked about earlier, and we need to take people in areas like our alternative call center and put them back on the road. So patrol staffing, #1 issue. #2, and this was the second part of your question was, what is the department's greatest weakness? I think our greatest weakness is also our greatest potential for success, and that is the significant number of officers that we're short. Right? We have a really great opportunity. Somebody in this room is going to have an amazing opportunity to take that deficit and turn it into a strength. We can create a police department that looks and acts and behaves like the community as a whole, and I think there's huge successes to be had there. First 90 days, definitely patrol staffing. Second issue is transparency. I think there's a lot of information that we as a police department keep track of. We have loads of information, stuff you would probably never want to know, but you might. And I think a lot of that can be shared a lot more proactively. Information like crime statistics can be published monthly by geographical area. That's something that's already developed. It's in the can waiting to go. Previous administrations have held it back. So to be able to see in your neighborhood how many of every kind of crime occurred in the last 30 days, 90 days, a year, and how did we do? How successful were we? I've said this before. If people have problems, right? I think #1 they have to approach us and tell us, and that's some of what we're getting in the questions. That's some of what we get at the feedback at the police commission meetings every 2 weeks. The second thing is you got to give us, whoever the chief is going to be, an opportunity to fix what's going on, and an opportunity basically to satisfy people and to impress people with our customer service. Because law enforcement has become a very customer service driven profession in the last 2 decades. And then #3, we haven't satisfied you or you're not impressed, then you got to tell us about it again and give us an opportunity. Like everybody else in the community, we put our pants on one leg at a time. We shop at the same grocery store as everybody else. Our kids play baseball with everybody else's kids. We're people, but we have a duty and a responsibility to take this police department and guide it forward.
Mr. Logan, first 90 days, what would you do first?
That's a great question. So in the military, and the way I was trained as a leader is the first 90 days is you stop, look, listen, and you get ideas and concepts. But in this day and age, and what's going on with the police department today, and all of the issues that it has, it needs to be, you don't have 90 days to wait. You need to take action immediately. And to the points that everyone's making here is I think it's a reallocation of personnel. When I became the chief of staff for the National Guard, I asked my full-timers, where are all my people? Can you tell me where all 700 people are? And they couldn't tell me that. And so I believe that same issue is in the police department. Where is everybody and where are they working? And are they in the right places that each of the candidates here have brought up? And so do we reallocate them into patrol, which is the backbone of the department, and into investigations, which is the important support of that. And so I think that first at least 30 days is to get out to the field, to look at, to meet with all the commanders, to meet with the assistant chiefs, and find out where is everybody, where do you have vacancies, and do you have the right people in the right place? And if not, what do you need? And so how do I, as chief, remove obstacles for you, commanders, to do your job? And so that's where I see the chief's role is. And that's right up front. Sit down with all the assistant chiefs, sit down with the deputies, and say, okay, how do we help remove the obstacles so that the commanders can do their job, and then the captains can do their job, and the lieutenants and sergeants can do their job. And so that's what's most important right now, is find out where is everybody. Let's get everybody in the right place. Let's move them around. Yes, we have vacancies. We'll worry about filling those after the first 90 days, but let's move the department in the right direction. And also to meet with the community, to get out into the community as a leadership team with the assistant chiefs, the ACs, and the majors of the various components such as personnel, finance, to be out in the public and meet with them and find out what are the issues, what are the concerns, what do you have, and what can we help you make sure that our department is the best that it is.
Mr. Ebner, what would you do in the first 90 days?
Well, in the first 30 days, I know what I would do. I would come in and I would evaluate. I would make every supervisor and commander justify the positions under their command. It's amazing when you make someone actually have to come before you and tell you why they need so many people as opposed to why they shouldn't be in patrol or somewhere else, like Ben was saying, in specialist positions. I would immediately move resources to where we know we need them, which is in patrol. If you look at violent crime, you look at property crime, look at the number of stolen vehicles is up to like 1,500 so far this year. That's astronomical. And what I would also do is I've had the fortunate to work 8-hour shifts, 9-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts, and 12-hour shifts. And I've also supervised the budget and managed a budget of over $350 million. The most efficient way for patrol to operate and the most effective way is a 12-hour shift. I would immediately move patrol operations to a 12-hour shift. It's cost effective, it's better for the officers because they get more time off away from work to rest and recuperate, to be with their family, and then I would build from there. We need to get back to integrity and accountability. You spoke about the previous chief and the other chief that just left, and I have nothing against them. I think they probably did a job that was okay until someone went off the rails and they committed a crime. No, the public needs to know that they can trust us, that we have integrity, and they can count on us. That'll start with me and it'll work its way down. I'll make sure that the deputies and commanders that we have in place know that that's our staple. Trust and accountability. And then we'll move from there, because recruiting, as we know, is a serious issue. We're down 300 people. Just moving people around, there's going to be some areas of the department where they're not going to have the personnel that they used to have. But operations, patrol, they will have the people that they need because they're the ones answering the calls. They're the ones that the public are interacting with. And that's what takes me to the last part, which is the most important part, is the accountability with the public and the public's input. We can't do this job without the public support. We need to make sure that the public is part of the solution, that we sit down with them, that myself from day one will be out there in the public. Within the first 30 days, not only am I going to meet every officer that works here, which will be a large task this size, but also the civilian employees, and then be out with the public with my commanders. I think it's important for the public to be able to see you out there, as well as the media to know that you're going to have an open and honest relationship. And that's what it'll be. It'll be open and honest.
Okay, hard to believe that we've been here already for about an hour, and so we want to go through some of these next questions, and please keep them coming, although I have a huge pile here and hopefully get to as many as possible. So let's try to keep the next few answers, if we could, a little brief so that we can get through more of these. It's not illegal to be homeless. It's not a crime to be homeless, but there are a lot of questions about how HPD interacts with the homeless population and what more can be done. So, Mr. Logan, Pat says, what, if anything, can you do or have done to combat the horrible homeless problem destroying Oahu? What is law enforcement's role with the homeless crisis? Michael wants to know. Glenn has a related question. How will the candidates plan to train officers to deal with the mentally ill? We know that many people who are homeless, chronically homeless, also have mental health issues. There's just too many names here to count. But basically, how do we better address homelessness from HPD's perspective?
Well, thank you. One great questions. I think the Honolulu Police Department, while it's a law enforcement role, the homeless is not it's not a primary issue of what the department needs to take care of, if on a holistic point of view. But they are an element of the public that we need to deal with. And when I mean deal with, I don't mean mean-wise. One of my mantras and things that I've espoused is treat everybody with dignity and respect. So even if you have a homeless person going through a mental crisis, or a drug-induced crisis, is having issues and problems every day, we need to go out and do what we can to help those people. And whether that's buy them a burger if you can afford that, or whether it's take them to the store and get them some things that they want. But we also got to help the business owners who have homeless issues. And now, like in Chinatown and Waikiki, we've got some people that are moving their businesses away because of this homeless population. Is it a law enforcement issue? Not necessarily. It's a city issue. It's a community issue. And so all of us got to come up with solutions to the problem. And what can we do with the homeless population? Can we find a large enough plot of land that we can build a facility that would allow the homeless to go there and someplace to shower and bed down for the night instead of sleeping at a doorway somewhere in Waikiki or downtown Honolulu? So we need to come up with, I think, ingenuitive ways to figure out how the community as a whole can take care of it. Because it didn't happen overnight, as Scott mentioned something earlier about our vacancy problem. The homeless situation has been going on for a number of years. I know growing up here for the last 50 years, you might have saw one or two homeless people when I was a child running around Waikiki and playing at the zoo. But in today's, you can't hop, skip, and a jump anywhere without seeing a homeless person or tripping over somebody. And so we have to deal with that issue. So how do we as law enforcement help support the community and interacting and taking care? I know Mike's got the HONU program that he's been running, and they've been driving around different places of Honolulu, setting up and being able to take care of homeless, getting them off the streets. And then what do we do with the homeless that have district court or judiciary issues that need to be adjudicated? Do we want them coming to district court and handling that? Or can we bring a court mobile out with a judge and a clerk and some other and prosecutors and defense attorneys to go meet with the homeless in a given area, whether it's at the HONU site or something, so that we can help them deal with those issues too. And so those are the ways the community can get involved.
What do you say to Michael? What is law enforcement's role with the homeless crisis?
Yeah, homelessness is not against the law, right? But there are a lot of criminal actions that surround homelessness. And you mentioned homelessness and mental illness, which I think are two very important elements to consider. The third one that you didn't mention, which is probably somewhere in the other questions, is substance abuse, right? So we see a huge uptick in those three things occurring in people that we encounter in a negative way all the time. And again, to Mike's credit, Mike's done a fabulous job of helping to develop a HONU help program that the department has been successful. But I think one of the most important issues surrounding this, from a law enforcement, from a CEO perspective, from a 30,000-foot point of view, the most important thing is to form collaborative partnerships. Because as a law enforcement agency, we're not equipped to handle mental health issues and substance abuse issues. We have some training. We certainly can intercede and intervene when necessary. Our job is triage, really, when it comes to those issues. But being able to refer people appropriately and working with the judiciary and working with the prosecutor's office to develop some sort of interdiction that doesn't land people who are mentally ill or addicted to drugs in the same criminal environment as people who are intentionally making wrong choices and being violent.
Mr. Ebner, what is your thought on law enforcement and homelessness?
Well, like Ben said, homelessness is not a crime, first and foremost. And law enforcement isn't the answer, but they're part of the solution. I think everyone needs to know that. Actually, one of our assessment questions that we had to do was on homelessness. And what I thought was very important is to make sure you bring in the proper stakeholders. As somebody who's not from Honolulu, in my first 90 days, you can read it, I'm sure the commissioners will read it, that I recommended that we would host a Honolulu Homeless Intervention Summit, meaning we would bring in all the stakeholders from businesses to volunteers, to the ACLU, to everyone that has a say, including people who are former homeless people, so they could tell their story of what they've been through. We know mental illness and we know addiction is a very driving force of some of the social issues. But this is a whole government and a whole society approach. Law enforcement has a part in it, and they will do their part, but they shouldn't be arresting or trying to arrest their way out of this or citing people for citations out of it. It's not going to do any good. We need to get to the root cause by bringing the stakeholders together, whether we have to develop more social programs or, like I said, that's why I named it intervention. We need to intervene. That should be our role as peacemakers, as public safety.
What is law enforcement's role with homeless and with the crisis that we are currently undergoing in Honolulu?
You know, it's a very complex issue. I'm happy to hear that the other three candidates support the homeless programs, meaning that if you guys are chosen, I would hope that they don't die under your leadership. But for me, it's something that's near and dear to my heart. It is something that was a change for me. Coming up in the department, I was your enforcer. I was patrol in some of the hardest districts during the hardest times. I was narco vice. I was that guy that would come with the ram and break down a door. And then I got tasked to deal with Chinatown, and the CILI law came out, and it said, you know, go ahead, take all these troops and apply the law, get them out of here. And when we were doing it, and it didn't feel right, I was like, okay, so yeah, we cleared them out, but we didn't solve the problem. We just pushed it over district borders. So, you know, long story short, in the sake of time, what I realized is that you got to have a balanced approach, right? One half the community is saying, hey guys, understand, these people are hurting, they're in crisis, they're not criminals. The other half of the community is saying, do your job, there's a law against what they're doing. So for me, what I came up with is a balanced approach. And what it means is that we do outreach before enforcement, and then we do outreach again right after. We have to be collaborative. We need to work with our partners to let them know, hey, we got complaints in, let's say, Kaka'ako, and we're going to have to do an enforcement at some point because the community is demanding it. So, you know, outreach providers, please go out there and offer as many services as possible. Be transparent with the homeless community, say that we have complaints. And unfortunately, you guys can either accept services or maybe move along, right? And again, it's one of those things where it's so complex, and you know, I could go on about all the homeless initiatives that I've done, and I think a lot of people are aware of it, so I won't bore everyone. But the reality is that Kaka'ako is a perfect example of what outreach enforcement looks like. You know, I don't want to say the years because I'm going to screw it up, but there was a point in time where HPD said we are not going to enforce against homeless, right? We tried to take that stance, and Kaka'ako had about 300 people. It was out of control. You know, you guys remember that? Yeah. So it was out of control. And then we went the other way, right? Okay, well then let's just enforce the heck out of it, right? And then we did, and all it did was it upset the community in regards to the advocates, right? So then now we're like, what do we do then, right? When we're nice about it, it gets out of control, and then when we're strict about it, people get mad. So that's when we applied the balanced approach to Kaka'ako. And again, I haven't been there in a week, so I don't know if it got bad, but we cleared out Kaka'ako. When we were done with our campaign, there was only about 20 people left, right, over a course of a period of time. So like I said, you got to have a balanced approach. As the chief of police, you have to be willing to accept everyone's perception at large, right? In other words, if there's enough chunk of the community saying this, right, and there's enough of the chunk of the community saying that, we have to try to find middle ground. Every time we're always in this, oh, let's jump on this ship, let's jump on that ship, and then we're just trendy, but we're not solving the problem. I feel like of the candidates here, I understand the problem the most, and I mean that respectfully. I've been in green since 2017. I've received many mental health awards for outstanding leadership as a government worker, and I feel like I have the strongest partnerships. You know, thanks. You know, where's the camera? I don't know. Hi to all my social workers at home.
Well,
sorry.
let's
yeah, but you know, I'm ingrained, and I believe that the police department has an intricate role in dealing with it.
Okay, well, let's move on to this question because we focused a lot on recruitment, but this is an interesting question about officer retention, and we'll start with you on this one. Let's try to keep it brief because we only have about 15 minutes left. I'm curious about the new chief's plan on sworn officer retention as opposed to everyone's questions about hiring new officers. We are hemorrhaging, this is from a current officer, we are hemorrhaging experienced officers who are fleeing as soon as they hit 25 years as opposed to sticking around to help mentor new personnel. Clearly, this ties back to some of the mental health challenges that we were talking about, but how do we retain officers who may have hit that 25, but we want to keep on the force?
Yeah, exactly. If you're trying to fill the bathtub with water, you got to plug the drain first, right? You got to keep as much resources, as many people here as long as possible. And part of that may go back to just one idea briefly. California, a lot of other states have what's called a drop program, which is a deferred retirement program. Essentially that people who are near the end of their career enter a drop status where they continue in their current role, but they're setting themselves a retirement date. And during that period, their retirement, rather than collect their retirement benefits for themselves, they accrue. And after a period of 5, 6, 7 years, they reach that drop date, they get all those accrued retirement benefits as kind of a lump sum, and they can move forward. So it's kind of like an early retirement, but it's also a planning mechanism, right? So implementing a drop program, and will that be simple? Oh my gosh, no, right? You want to talk about collaboration, city, BFS, budget and fiscal, and the ERS, and there's going to be a lot of voices that weigh in on this. But to me, that's a huge opportunity that we're losing, like you said, seasoned officers at the end of their career that are going to help to mentor the next generation.
How do we keep the ones that we have?
Yeah, as exactly what Ben is just said, we have to close the back doors as we open up the front door to let people in. I think it's sitting down as the chief, as the deputies, as the leadership on the fourth floor, to take those that are getting near to 25 years, bring them upstairs one by one and talk to them and see what do they want, how is their career going, where do they see themselves in a couple of years. Is retirement the absolute for you, or is there somewhere else in the department that we can find for you that maybe you can finish another 5 or 7 years in the department and help others, whether that be at the training academy, helping train new recruits coming in, or helping train or helping support the reserve officers that are out there. So that's the first thing, is to bring in those approaching 25, to catch them before they hit the 25 and ready to go, and find out what they want to do with their future and how can we help them stay and encourage them to stay in. And then those that are over 25 that could go at any moment, and bring those into 25 and 30 years and say, hey, are you in the right place? Do you plan on staying for a little while? What is the trigger for you to say tomorrow's the day I'm done? So how do we, as a department, show the value that you have, the education experience that you have, and turn that back around to help the department and continue on. So I think those are important meetings we need to have.
You cited this right off the top when we were talking about recruitment and some of the issues that are facing the department. So what would you do to plug the hole, if you will?
To retain officers, right, there are several things that make people want to do their job, right? It's pay, it's the distance to work, and most importantly, it's the work environment, right? So due to collective bargaining, I can't really control their pay, but what I can do is control their work environment. One of the biggest reasons why people leave is that there's an unfair promotion process and they can't get promoted, so they leave. They don't feel valued. They feel like their skill sets are not acknowledged and they're not able to make it to the next level, so they leave. So it's, again, I know I'm beating the horse dead in regards to the legitimacy of the department, but if I can restore it and officers can have even more pride than they already have now, they'll hang around. And if they feel like things are fair and opportunities are fair, down to assignments, down to promotions, they'll hang around. And the thing is that you gotta let people know that they're valued, right? In other words, I know you could leave, I appreciate you hanging around. I don't care who's picked here tonight, there's gonna be a good chunk of people that retire because they're, for whatever reason, right? It just happens. So it's not a dig at any one person. Even for me, if I'm chosen, there's going to be a chunk of people that leave because my ideologies are very forward-thinking, and some people that have been in since the 80s and 90s, it may not match what they think that the job should be. So like I said, you got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest with people that are staying around. And I think if you just show a little bit of appreciation and I can stabilize the ship, they'll hang around.
How do we keep the officers that we need to keep?
Well, all three of them touched on some really good points. the one thing that I'll start with, and I think it's the most important, is the most precious resource of any police agency is the personnel. It's not our equipment, it's not our uniforms, it's not our anything else, it's the people. And I'm talking sworn and civilian, both are extremely important. So retaining them, they need to know that they matter. This job is very important. It's a noble profession, like I said, and people need to understand that they matter and that we need to keep their environment, their work environment, one where they want to work. Because we're seeing throughout the country, we're seeing people leave agencies where we haven't seen before. And I come from a department where over 95% of the people that graduate the academy stay until they retire, which is a very high percentage. I'd love to bring that here. I'm not saying I could do it immediately, but it's something that we could work towards. There has to be professional development of every officer from the day they graduate. They get trained for many months at the academy, but from when they graduate to when they retire, if you look at any one, probably these two majors here, their training is different. It went down different paths. We need to make sure that officers are professionally developed throughout their career at every stage, every year on the job, to every supervisor position, to when they get promoted. And that also comes with an equal, fair, and equitable disciplinary system and promotional system. I've helped develop a promotional system that's based on, merit and ability. And of course, your education, your training, your experience. You want to be able to better yourself. How better to do that than have an agency that supports you do that through education incentive programs, where if I got hired, I would push through collective bargaining and through the police commission to have authorization to pay officers a higher percentage based on their level of education. If you have an associate's degree, you'll get this much more. If you have a bachelor's degree, you'll get this, a master's degree, that. And it makes for officers that want to better themselves and stay here. And the same thing with education reimbursement. I think that's extremely important, and health and wellness, of course.
We have less than 10 minutes. Let's try to get through as many as we can here. Greg in Kaka'ako has a specific question on body cameras, and we touched on body cameras briefly in some of the other comments, but I'd like to get your stance. Police body cameras are an asset of transparency. How will you maintain that transparency to ensure body camera footage is available in its entirety to the public?
Well, it comes with a clear, set policy. And I just came from a department where we've had body cameras for well over 5 years, and we just developed and rewrote a new policy, and that was statewide, but it started with our agency. And what I'm saying is like they were talking earlier, and I just can't comprehend if this is a problem. Why are officers turning their cameras off? There needs to be, it'll be written in the policy if I'm here, what'll happen if you turn your camera off if you're intentionally doing it. Okay. If it's an accident, an error, or there's a malfunction, that's different. But intentional, turning off the camera, that's unacceptable.
Mr. Logan?
Absolutely. The body cameras are a way to keep officers honest, but also to keep the community honest. Not everybody's going to tell the truth when they're being subject to arrest or citation or being impacted by the police. And so you want to be able to, the body camera is a way to do that. But we ought to hold officers accountable that aren't using the body cameras the right way. And once you turn it on, it stays on. Now there are rules and federal guidelines and state guidelines and policies on how to use body cameras and when they are turned on and turned off. But we got to make sure that the officers always use a body cam. I'm even going as far to say we need cameras in our cars so that you can monitor what's going on in front of the car, as well as body cameras to better capture what is going on in the community, to keep accountability to the officers and make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing.
Mr. Lambert, what is your stance on body cameras?
I totally agree with everyone here that it kind of depends on what the circumstances were. Let's say they didn't turn it on accident and it didn't result, the stop went smooth, there was no complaints. Then we can go with some very easy written training. But when officers aren't turning it on and we miss key evidence that would make the community feel that we are trying to cover something up, then we need to come down a little harder, especially if it's repetitive. So for example, what that looks like for me in my disciplinary matrix would be first time the incident doesn't amount like it was a non-incident, 384, which is it's basically a verbal counseling in written form. And then the second time they do it, it's a 121, right? Which is, it goes in your record it's a real write-up. And then again, the third time, if it's something that affects public trust by not being captured, you're gonna eat a day. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I'm probably never gonna fire someone for that, but they're gonna eat day after day. And what people are gonna say, oh, a day is so lenient. You gotta remember now, a day's pay can be anywhere from $240 to $400. So what I'm gonna basically be levying is a administrative fine for officers by taking 1 day of pay for officers that maliciously or habitually turn off their camera when it counts.
Okay, what are your thoughts on body cameras?
You know, all amazing points. To Scott's point about we should have a policy, we do. We just administratively we don't enforce it as a department, and that's a huge problem. And to Joe's point about cameras in cars and cameras on people, I absolutely agree. I would actually take it one step further. So it's interesting, we mentioned the FBI Academy earlier. One of my classmates in the FBI Academy and I were talking last week about an application that his agency developed. It's freely available on people's mobile platforms. I don't want to give the name because I don't want you to download it, and there's a specific reason. And basically what the citizens download this app, and through a voice command, you can start the activation of voice and video recording on your own camera as a member of the public, as a person who got pulled over, as somebody who just sees something. And then what happens is that video and audio recording is sent to the police department, right? And that, to me, that's the key, right? And that's why I don't want you to download their app, because Florida's going to get flooded with everybody trying out the app. But to me, that's an open source thing, is something they're willing to share. And to me, that opens the door to transparency. It opens the door to, there's now no dispute, right? Whether the officer turned on or didn't turn on their body camera, a citizen also has the same opportunity to share that information with us as the police department and with their contacts to say, hey, I got pulled over, here's a video of what happened.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to give each of you an opportunity to take about a minute and give a closing statement. We learned a lot throughout the last 90 minutes about each of you and about your backgrounds. What is something that you want the public to know that we didn't cover tonight? We'll start with you, about why you should be given this position.
Well, Hawaii's my home. I've been here for over 50 years. My wife is from the Big Island. My kids, all but one live here. One lives in California. My brothers are still here. My sister lives in California. So my family's here. Hawaii is home. Being the leader of the police department is full circle for me. As the chief, I can bring back all of the things that I saw in the department. When I left in in 2002, I left the department where the citizen or the community believed that the police department, probably 80-90% were that the police department was effective. Today, if you look at the national committee, the national community survey, only 45% of the community believes the police department is doing the right thing, or doing a good job. And so we need to change that. We need to fix that. And I believe that my time here, my connections, not connections, but my relationships I've developed throughout the business community, throughout the academia that's here as I teach for Hawaii Pacific University. All of those things I can bring to the table and help the police department move forward. Well, there's a lot of great officers in the police department. Yes, there's a couple bad apples that probably need to find another job. But by and large, their officers are great. We just need to recognize those officers, encourage that, and convince the community that the police department is the same police department that I left in 2002.
Mr. Ebner.
Sure, well, thank you. And thank you for everyone being here. This has been a pleasure, and it's really been humbling. I think the most important thing everyone needs to know about me is I'm not going to come here and make this place the department I came from. My job is to make a very good department, an outstanding department where everyone wants to come here. Well, this will be the staple for the country 5, like I said, 10 years from now, where people will say, I want to apply with Honolulu Police Department. This is what they're doing there. That's my ultimate goal, and that comes by building trust and legitimacy both internally and with the public. I feel with my experience, 30 years in law enforcement, from starting out as a city police officer, going through as a detective, internal affairs, a commander in operations, to being a chief of staff. I know what it's like to run a department this big with over a $350 million budget, to deal with 2,500 vehicles that you have to upfit, purchase, maintain. I know this is not as large here, but that doesn't happen overnight. It was a process that I'm proud of through my education, my training, my experience. Just like Ben's been at the FBI National Academy, it was a great experience for me. So was going to the Naval Postgraduate School. But I think what we haven't touched upon here is building partnerships. I've worked with the FBI, the ATF, the DEA in partnerships, especially when I was the director of the Fusion Center in New Jersey and the deputy superintendent of investigations. That's something I would bring here, and I look forward to becoming a part of the community here. That's why my wife and daughter are upstairs.
Okay, I have to leave it there so that everybody gets enough time. Mr. Lambert, what's your closing thought tonight?
I just want everybody to know at home that I'm not going to be more of the same. There's a lot of public sentiment that says that, no, there's not going to be a local leader that's going to come and make a change. I can tell you right now that what we've seen, and this is not a dig at any of the chiefs, they all have their things that they did good for the community, but a lot of times what happens with the chief is they'll come in, they'll put some paint on the walls, they'll change the flooring, they'll put on some pictures, and they'll tell you that the room is different. and it's not. It's the same room. If you take off the paint, you take down the pictures, it's rotten. The studs are rotten, the plumbing is rotten, the electric wiring is rotten, and that's what this department needs, is somebody to tear it down and rebuild it. And I have the courage, I have the will, I have the persistence, I have the vision to tear it down to the foundation, which is the Hawaii Revised Statutes, the Constitution, revised ordinances of Honolulu, and rebuild a department that we all will be proud of.
Okay, we'll give you the last word.
You know, I feel like the greatest benefit and the greatest power that we have as a department is the members of the department. And I feel like you know, this is a very unique time, and ultimately the community and the department are going to be well served by any of the 4 candidates that are here. Why me? You know, I've prepared myself academically. My master's degree from the Law Enforcement and Public Safety Leadership Program at the University of San Diego is key. I'm at the National Academy right now, not right now, but in a couple days I'll be back finishing that up, and just those collaborative partnerships. You know, also this format, we should have done like 4 hours or 5 hours. The stack of questions is huge. And I feel like maybe if people want to learn more about me as a candidate or more about me as a person, I would invite them to visit my website, which is meetmajorben.com. And basically it's a bunch of academic works, and it talks about my theories and my ideas on all kinds of different issues in modern day policing.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll have to leave it there. Mahalo to you for joining us tonight. Of course, we do thank our guests, the finalists for Honolulu Police Chief, Honolulu Police Major Mike Lambert, retired Major General Arthur Joe Logan, Honolulu Police Major Ben Moskowitz, and retired Lieutenant Colonel Scott Ebner. The general public will have one more opportunity to be heard. The Honolulu Police Commission will take public testimony this Monday, May 23rd at 9:30 at the main police station on Beretania Street. We have more information on that on our website, pbshawaii.org. The Police Commission may make its decision that same day. Next week, the COVID-19 pandemic exposed a frightening vulnerability here that has been decades in the making: Hawaii's reliance on imported food, which is estimated at 85 to 90%. So can we enhance our food resiliency and security? Join us for Kako, Hawaii's Town Hall, the future of our food. That's next Thursday at 7:30. Please do join us then. I'm Yanji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.